Sonic Frontiers. With ominous music, the story wastes my time for no reason, and eventually shows Eggman putting a metal thing on something to light it up. Why did he know to go here? I guess he was reading about ancient myths on the internet. This reminds me of his first cutscene in Adventure 2, but it doesn't hold a candle to it. The lazily named ancients with the same name as those in the Sonic Boom game have secrets he wants. He grabs the metal disc, trying to keep it from getting lost, and gets pulled into another dimension. All because he didn't have a robot do this like Metal Sonic, when he usually has robots do all the work for him. It's nice of Amy to go with Sonic and Tails in the adventure, but I'm wondering why, because she was perfectly content to not go with him in most of the games before this, despite it being out of character for SA2 Amy. Eventually, the plane gets sucked into a portal to another dimension or something, like in Sonic Rush Adventure. And it'll hopefully be explained why, to stop being so arbitrary that I feel nothing about it. Sonic wakes up and wastes my time until a voice from nowhere says he's awesome because he escaped cyberspace from his own Mary Sue powers. I don't remember him boosting away from it after all, it's just because he's the main character. He tells him to find the emeralds and destroy the Titans to tear down the barriers between universes. And Sonic wishes he was given context. He explains just fine why he decides to do this anyways, because some direction is better than none. And what he should also add is that he's used to getting the Chaos Emeralds and having it work out for him, so he would have looked for them anyways. And Titan sounds like the name of an evil monster. If a Titan tried to kill him, he would have killed it anyways. This plot's inoffensive so far, other than the slow pacing, but I'm still noticing that it's Generations 2. And at least in Generations, it could have made sense that Eggman told the Time Eater not to defeat Sonic too, because you wanted him to go through all those levels and boss fights. There's nothing to say about the cutscenes with no dialogue. The voice also tells Sonic to use something to go to the digital dimension and that he needs more gears. And then he calls it cyberspace. Isn't that what those levels in Sonic Advance 2 and 3 were? And that shadow level? How needlessly complicated that this is a different universe from that. Since in this one Sonic goes through levels he's already at least aware of for no reason. At least Generations had an understandable excuse for it. This is so convoluted I have to just assume it's levels he's already at least aware of, because one of the levels is a level only Shadow went through. And this game makes us have to assume Sonic might have gone through it off screen. The cutscene takes a needlessly long time handing Sonic a blue emerald. It's so boring to see the cutscene that just slowly shows off the boring landscape ahead with nothing happening. It seems confusing that hearts come out at Sonic before a trap gets destroyed, freeing Amy. Sort of, because she's really in another universe, but her consciousness is in Sonic's. There's nothing interesting about the cutscene where they talk. Sonic points out that he dealt with Zappy stuff before, and tells her she made a good call. What Zappy stuff? This is literally just a measly video game plot. Sonic Advance 2 and Generations and even Pinball Party already did a plot where Sonic just has to save all of his friends. Why does the cutscene that eventually shows Sage for the first time drag on so long? There's no dialogue until she tells him to leave for the first of a billion times. She expects him to follow her order for no reason. You'd think she'd know him better considering that Eggman made her. The coding for who he is would already be in her. And like a generic villain, she hopes a Titan would destroy him. Sonic gets slapstick, and eventually Sage vanishes and the cutscene ends. And then he wakes up. I guess she was too stupid to check his pulse, when the knowledge of that and how many times he survived stuff should already be in her programming. She's nothing I haven't seen before when it comes to main villain henchmen, and all of the previous Eggman sidekicks were more interesting and comical, being hammy characters who made a big impression and had unforgettable voices. Amy gets asked who her friend is, and she takes a needless pause before giving exposition on the Coco that have nothing to do with the plot and Sonic. It doesn't seem like the Coco can talk. So how does Amy know anything about this one? I just have to assume that either the Coco are telepathic or she was conveniently born with the ability to read their minds. Why does the cutscene waste my time showing Eggman walk a few steps while saying nothing? Why does it think this digital dimension's more advanced than his own? It at least tries to be charming when he says, "Note to self, don't admit that to anyone." He says he wants to quantify the data here, somehow. I can tell this dialogue's by Ian Flynn because Eggman all of the previous games usually talked like a normal person. But here he talks like he's trying to overcompensate for losing ownership of the world by talking like he swallowed a dictionary. So at least you can explain it, but how are kids supposed to be entertained by this? Amy gives exposition about the digital keys and towers she found that are made to hold the Chaos Emeralds. Why is she talking like it'd be a surprise that the ancients wanted to use the magical jewels of the world? Amy wants Sonic to lead the kids of the Coco back to her, and Sonic's happy to do so, because he's in no hurry. Unlike in SA1 where he was in a hurry to get all the emeralds before Eggman. Wait, shouldn't he be in a hurry to save all of his friends? Because they're conscious while captured? This is finally another use of Amy being the type to care about the little things and do good deeds that don't just involve beating Eggman. It's nice to see the Cocos reunite, but why did they turn into light and go into the sky? They're just magical ghosts who arbitrarily are like that. If this Coco can move, why haven't the Coco all found their kids already? Why'd they need help? Every single time Sage appears from this point on, she's the same generic, boring villain she was before. When she changes even a tiny bit, I'll mention it, of course. You'd think she'd learn her lesson after the first time. Amy's wasting her breath trying to talk reason into her. Sage thinks love is too vague in its definition, even though if she can already speak English, then she'd already have a definition of love straight out of the Webster English Dictionary. So this feels forced because of the punctuation mark right after the word love, implying that's an actual definition. Amy knows that Sonic would enjoy exploring, having good chemistry with him. Why does she say amor instead of lover? It's not even spelled right. She wants Sonic to get rid of all the wild grass in the farm by simply running around, even though he's not doing that in spin dash form. Not even Mike Gallagher would write this. It's not like he burns it away from friction because that caused a huge wildfire to spread. Amy says something must have ruined this land. Why else would the Coco be an ancient species with only their ghosts remaining instead of still farming the land? Sonic's so self-absorbed, it took until now for him to ask Amy how she's feeling. Amy says she feels lighter than air, and he reassures her. There's just so little to say about this plot. They shouldn't have so many cutscenes with a thin plot. The cyberspace levels seem to end so fast, it makes me wonder why people demonize Sonic Forces for having levels as short as they usually are, while conveniently forgetting that the first level in Sonic 1 was 30 seconds long. Eggman's shown telling Sage to keep looking for a way to get him out of here. Why does he tell her to keep up the good work when he's still trapped? And she didn't kill Sonic. From his perspective, she's doing a terrible job and is no excuse for taking a long time to evaluate all safe options when she's an AI. She should think faster than him. The Eggman I know would just be irritated and impatient. But instead he's already showing the signs that Sage is favoritized by the writers. Sage says she's extending the range of her control of the relics, so Eggman says commendable, and finally shows him patience with her. She thinks it's too dangerous to get him out somehow, and he naturally says unacceptable and takes off. The only way she could get him out would be to make another portal. How would going through a portal be dangerous? Wouldn't she know how to make a portal just like the one he went through because of the data I put into her and the data in cyberspace? Why wouldn't she tell him why it's too dangerous? It's only there to keep a secret from the audience. Amy warns the Cocos to not get too far ahead. And Sonic's naturally impatient that they haven't found Tails and she's just diverting him. She randomly accuses them of wanting to leave someone in need behind when she'd never actually think that, since they happily helped her all this time before. She doesn't act like she cares about Tails, who she knew far longer and should care more about than strangers. Why wouldn't it occur to her that he's been going through the same experience she had been when she was trapped? Somehow Sonic doesn't get mad at her for this, and randomly says he's worried about her, as if it's Flynn writing Saw and Amy pandering. Then I see explosions around the Ancients. Why are a few of them slowly heading towards each other and hugging when they know they're about to be blown up? That's not a natural reaction. They wouldn't be in a good mood. This rips off the Tikal flashbacks in SA1 a little, and it's pointless to the plot. You could remove the Cocos from the plot, and while it had less to it, you wouldn't notice anything, because the plot's just about Sonic beating the boss fights and levels to beat the game. Sonic doesn't want to remember this stuff, so why would it activate? Amy bores me by saying the obvious about the last cutscene and saying she'd want to share love with the world. Because that's an appropriate reaction to seeing people die in an explosion. And Sonic says he knows she'll do great without saying that's because he thinks she'll get a boyfriend other than him. She never implied she was talking about anything but romantic love. So this is not like him. Why is an area no longer locked off to Sonic? I guess because he got collectibles and the areas are built with Mario 64 logic. Just assuming anybody capable of getting them deserves to get past security for no reason. It doesn't explain that in the past there was only one Ancient with Sonic's abilities, and he was a hero who was the only one with clearance to go through all those areas. Amy's somehow sensing a Titan at the head. At least she tried to help Sonic by looking for the emerald off screen. Talk is cheap. But apparently that's all Sonic's friends can do anymore because showing them fight robots is so expensive that it can only be for a few seconds. Why is there a boring cutscene of nothing but Sonic running? He doesn't even look as fast as he's supposed to. There should be a gale force wind rushing past him as he's leaving a blue blur behind. What was the point of a flashback where an Ancient says there must be another way and that's all? Sonic apologizes to Amy, and she expects me to believe she's feeling more like her old self when she doesn't explain why, and he says he'll let her do another card reading with him, establishing that out of the blue for pandering. Considering Sonic Battle and Riders, there was no indication before this game that he willingly hung out with her for fun. Where's the game where we see what caused her to stop coming on too strong? And tell him that she's gonna do that. And of course, he cares that Knuckles is trapped and wants to get him out right away. I'd rather they put the cage somewhere else so that the cutscene wouldn't exist, because he'd never see his cage until after Knuckles was freed. Why does it take so long for Sonic's friends to be freed from the cages? Generations didn't take this long to free its friends. I like that it's not Tails who saved first. At least that's interesting. Knuckles realistically complains because he doesn't feel normal. Uncharacteristically, Sonic feels like trying to hold him back from punching him when he'd know it's not his fault he's not back to normal. And why would he need to when he's intangible to him? And Sonic tells him to help him find emeralds. Why is he glaring at Knuckles now? Their antagonistic body language together has never felt so forced. Why does Sage talk as if Sonic somehow doesn't already know she can activate Titans and make them mad at him? How am I supposed to think she's smart? I'll never talk about her again unless she stops being repetitive. Emotionless characters are boring. I'd rather she be boring than annoying like Eggette, but Eggette has a better design. Why does she have white hair? You could say Eggman designed her and so she has white hair like an egg, but the problem is Eggman didn't design her. She just came out of cyberspace looking like a little girl for no reason. Why does Knuckles think he can stop her laser and succeed at it when he's intangible? Sonic goes in front of him and tells him to stop being aggressive, as if there's any chance of him going all the way up to her to attack her when he's intangible. He lampshades that Sonic's too trusting. I have to just assume he's trusting because she looks like a little girl, when he should know an AI could be made to look anyway, and it doesn't mean she's a little girl who deserves to be treated like one. He's that shallow. Knuckles should explain this to him. Knuckles gives exposition that Sonic needs to use a cannon or something to drain water to progress. We all know that's what Sonic games are all about. That's why people loved Amy's levels. I like that Sonic's sarcastic with Knuckles because he tells me he's useless underwater. An exaggeration because he's capable of all the same things underwater that it can do above water. The dialogue after this is boring. I like that a main Sonic character finally points out that it's hot in a desert. Such faint praise. How does Knuckles know these Coco are supposed to do anything? I guess they are telepathic. It decreases Amy's uniqueness in the plot if Knuckles is having him do errands for the Coco too. There's nothing to say about him getting the emeralds. He does a dorky dance for it. Knuckles says nice work and gets told he makes a good supervisor. And of course, the villain doesn't understand good, so it's the evil cannot comprehend good cliché posing as interesting characterization. Eggman would say the same thing about generosity. If she looked more like Eggman, she wouldn't have as many bands as this. How does Sonic know he's seeing a battle when all I see are characters standing? And then Sonic sees the beings die and doesn't look concerned afterwards. Our hero. It's supposed to be Shadow who's the stoic one. Eggman gets shown saying to Sage that he looks forward to her battle reports because she's telling him about every time the robots hit Sonic. He says he'll give her control over his whole Eggnet, and she'll be changed from Orbot and Cubot. Him saying that implies he plans to scrap them in favor of her, and only didn't, conveniently, because Sage looked forward to having brothers. The Robotnik I know would scoff at the idea of talking about AI like they're people. And he definitely wouldn't humor one. Eggman uncharacteristically praises Sonic for no reason. He says he respects him. Since when? It's sad that AOSDH is more like the games because Flynn wrote this. And this is something he's done before. Sonic explains to Knuckles that when he uses something, the island beams a GPS signal to his brain, causing him to know the layout of the land. Why didn't he say this to Amy? This would have come up before. And how is this worth a whole cutscene? Sonic cares enough to ask Knuckles how his Cyber Cage experience was. I don't remember how Amy's was, so he doesn't care about Amy enough to ask her. Knuckles says he was drowning in nightmare visions, and it was somehow the most alone he ever felt, even though he spent his entire life alone until meeting Sonic and was trapped in a void in generations. Sonic wonders if Knuckles' visions were about his ancestors getting wiped out, and Sonic talks as if those are memories, meaning Knuckles was there, which makes me wonder if Knuckles' backstory in Sonic the Comic was based on what Sega told them ahead of time, since the same comic had the echidnas be Mayans early. Still, Sonic's jumping to conclusions here. Then boredom until the concept of ancient technology is lampshaded, and Knuckles jumps to the conclusion that a material is alien because it's the sturdiest one he encountered personally. It's not like he punched every material in the world. Why doesn't his rival lampshade this? Knuckles wants to round up the Cocos with Sonic's help. It's good that the story keeps showing that the heroes instinctively help. Why does Knuckles remember when he first laughed at Sonic? He says this place looks like the ruins from back home. Why? It's a flashback of Angel Island Zone. There are no ruined buildings there. So he wonders if echidnas used to live here. Then Sonic would have had flashbacks of them. He remembers laughing at Sonic again and says he can't let bad guys assault the bunker. And this must mean he still feels guilty about it. And he thanks Sonic for agreeing to humor him. What a boring story so far. At least Sonic Shuffle and the Mario and Sonic London stories had interesting aspects to get your attention. This is literally just a Breath of the Wild ripoff with almost nothing to say about it. A bunch of my time is wasted seeing the Cocos move, and eventually get into army positions before their spirits leave them. It's so arbitrary. Why do the heroes have to keep doing these things for them before they can go to the afterlife? And that's a needlessly depressing world, meaning that 99% of people are trapped like this with no one to save them. Sonic has the good sense not to talk when Knuckles is quiet and melancholic, even though he wasn't like that with Amy. When Shara was upset, he knew exactly what to say to her, and now he's just awkward when around sad people. He knew exactly what to say to Merlina. At least he thought he did. Knuckles says the ink scene that he's the last echidna that I expected from SA1. But there's nothing more to it than just that, and Sonic predictably reassures him. Then Knuckles envies his freedom when he wouldn't at this point because he's happily abandoned guarding the Master Emerald millions of times in the games. Even has reason to Sonic forces. So he's been free for a long time. This comes off as writing from someone who doesn't know the Sonic franchise and only knows the character from reading a character profile. Multiple people wrote this game. It's nice to see them show affection to each other. Knuckles shows compassion, saying that he'd like to think the ancients just moved on and lived somewhere else. Well, there's no proof that literally all of them stayed behind. You'd think it'd be common sense that some of them would have ran away. He says he was drawn here because there's stuff built to harness the emeralds. Even though if that was true, he would have come here a long time ago. Why would the ancients losing the emeralds inexplicably make them disappear? He just childishly says that instead of saying they got blown up. I know that Sonic getting emeralds is important for the plot, but it's so uninteresting and uncreative that I never feel like mentioning it anymore because there's nothing to say about it. Knuckles' next chat with Sonic is boring recap. Why wouldn't you have faith in Sonic to be able to beat the Titan when he's beaten the others so far to get here? It's not like they're all ganging up on him, so infinite isn't the excuse. Sonic again solves the puzzle with old technology to get the way forward out. At least him being able to solve puzzles acknowledges that he's supposed to be smarter than he seems. I kinda like Knuckles' confident dialogue in the face of what lies ahead. Most of the dialogue is boring and emotionless, so anything with emotion and character for once is very slightly more appreciated in this game. It's cool to see Sonic grab and hang on to the Flying Titan, but he would have realistically let go of it much earlier than that from the momentum going against his hand. The Titan just reminds me of that Wind Waker Sand boss. What is the point of a flashback where an ancient says something killed people when we already know that? The Tikal flashbacks are better because they involve echidnas, so they got designs we actually care about instead of Coco's. Knuckles is right, the Titans would be killed a lot faster if he fought them as Super Knuckles, because he's more used to punching. No wonder the Titans take 8 billion years to kill based on the footage. Just seeing a boss fight that involves forced waiting and takes minutes to beat pisses me off. It could last a minute and feel just as epic. It never made sense that the experience in the Cyber Cage was different for everybody. Why would the ancients make it like that? Why do the Cyber Cages even exist? We're not told that they're meant to punish criminals. You'd think if they were, the people in the cages would be reflecting on the bad things they did. Sonic doubles over needlessly depressingly, but it's worth it because it makes Tails hug him. Not that it matters, because he wouldn't be able to feel it. Sonic talks like he's too stupid to understand him, even though it's very easy to figure out what he's saying. He reassures Sonic. At one line, Tails' angst is because he's always being rescued. How's he the only one embarrassed? What about Knuckles? This is way more demeaning to him. Sonic asks Tails to find emeralds for him. How does a flash of light appear, warping him away? Why isn't Sonic surprised and worried by this? For all he knows, this killed him. Since when can they teleport? If being in cyberspace made them able to teleport, they would have just teleported out of the cages. I really hate seeing the cyber corruption. What's the point of showing it, let alone more than once, when we all know they won't kill him off? Even Shadow the Hedgehog wasn't needlessly depressing against his main character like this. So this is one of the biggest problems with the story. We already did this sort of thing in Sonic and the Secret Rings. Despite Sage being programmed to hate Sonic and see him as just an enemy, she's somehow sad he might be destroyed because he's the creator's pet mascot. Tails, like the other heroes, states the obvious. Sonic figures out that the Coco were made to have a real body for the ancients to use. If they were real bodies, then why would their spirits be sent to the afterlife after they do anything for them? Why wouldn't their new bodies be shaped like their old ones instead of being pathetic, cutesy things? Wouldn't they not be as capable?
Do you think I can change?
Tails says in cyberspace an evil twin of his called him out on doing nothing on his own. And Sonic says Tails has grown and reassures him. It's nice of him to humor him when he undid the growth he made in the adventure games as soon as heroes, and never looked back to become exactly like his inner insecurity told him he is. He deals with yet another Titan. It runs into a wall like Eve did. Sage knew he'd win. so I have to assume she only sent it after him out of programming obligation. Tails rattles off more boring exposition while touching ancient technology, somehow thinking Sonic would care. And then there's a redundant flashback about the laser storm against the ancients. Imagine if the Tikal flashbacks were mostly chaos destroying the echidnas over and over. You'd stop caring after a while and just be confused. The dialogue after that is boring and unneeded as usual. Again, the characters keep stating the obvious like it has a point. Why does Sonic want to be told about the ruins? He's not a history geek. I already know Sonic has a map in his mind. Tails reminds Sonic for no reason that they came here to find the emeralds, and figures someone tried booting up the system since they're in standby mode now. Why doesn't he say Eggman instead of someone? He just wasted Sonic's time because he said something about it. While Sonic was online, Tails got a bunch of info about the hopes of the ancients for no reason. Why would a person go into another universe cause another person in another place to get uploaded the diaries of other people? Wouldn't a button press do that? Sonic's friends getting the flashbacks makes even less sense than Sonic himself. Why even have cutscene dialogue before they find a remote control panel? It was all boring chit-chat. Sonic wants to find out what Eggman was trying to do with it. Tails wants Sonic to be careful and is thanked and called Buddy, and Sonic says see you. But the very next time after the fade to black, he's still with Tails, so that's lame. And they're talking about a Coco. Tails says that helping them is dishonest because their battle's already over. Huh? Isn't Tails supposed to be a good person? Why doesn't the so-called genius already know that they're giving them peace? I can tell who wrote this. He's only a genius by saying big words. And that's not smart either because it just makes him harder to understand. He says they need more pieces, and Sonic of course volunteers to find them. Right after Tails says the Coco are worried something happens because their hero didn't show, he naturally complains that he couldn't handle losing Sonic and Forces. Then Tails reassures the Cocos, and Sonic asks him if he'd like to talk, and he shut down in favor of finding the emeralds. Tails asks Sonic for another favor, and Sonic walks unusually slowly, but Tails is somehow smiling like he hasn't seen this, which is cheesy when we're supposed to feel bad for Sonic. Sage asks Tails if he trusts Sonic when clearly he would trust his best friend. How is she this stupid? She has to know he trusts him and is just hoping to be proven wrong. If he really trusted Sonic, he wouldn't be worried about his well-being in the first place. He'd just have the utmost faith that he would succeed. She relatably appreciates that his loyalty is based on empirical facts. She asks Sonic his end goal and Sonic describes goalposts. He has to know what she means. He's just trying to alleviate stress because of how annoying she's been. Sage is too cowardly to just outright tell him the voice is leading him to disaster. When he lampshades are being cryptic, I'm thinking, point out your problems doesn't make them go away. Sonic tells the Coco nice find. Sage tells Eggman he could escape with Sonic's help because he helped him before. It's out of character for Eggman to refuse to get Sonic's help when he was fine with it every other time before this. This is literally just to pad out the story. The same logic behind him being tired of it now would apply to all the previous times. So what took so long? She has no reason to think time is running out. Sage is shown saving him, and he praises her for benefiting him once again. Tails' insecurity in this game makes sense because his insecurity mocking him in cyberspace got him started on it. But him asking Sonic if he's a burden still came out of nowhere. He says he's being rescued too often, and somehow he thinks all he does is follow him, despite the fact that he gets dated from him in recent games. And he didn't follow him through the levels in the recent games. So he follows him less than he used to. Him saying he's wildly inconsistent is stilted. He should have said, then I have no excuse for this. Sonic's praising him for things he did way in the past isn't that much to be proud of. Sonic puts his hand on his shoulder symbolically and reassures him. Again with knowledge Tails should already know. Again, Tails is an idiot, but at least Sonic's insightful. Sonic says way to go to a Coco. There's usually nothing to say about these cutscenes. Sonic reminds Tails he's proud of him and calls him little bro like he's supposed to, and asks if he's feeling better. Tails says he can't grow into his full potential if he keeps following him, even though he only ever got to be useful by being on his adventures. The story tries to have me feel something by having Sonic be sad that he grew up so fast and dragging it on. But it's been too boring by this point for me to take it that seriously. When I'm talking like this, it's really no surprise that he calls him Little Bro. Of course someone who raised him would think of him as a little brother. They shake hands, and Sage is jealous of their friendship and regrets the idea of going with Eggman's order. It's cheesy that her flashbacks to Eggman have a girl badly singing Law the whole time. The point is to show her remembering all the times Eggman praised her, but without it showing the dialogue where he did so, it doesn't succeed, because it's not reminding you of what he talked to her about. I mean, it's not like it's showing her physical affection. Why does the cutscene linger so long and her standing still with no dialogue? Then Tails says something that could destroy a mountain has a battery, go figure. Why would we care about this? We already knew the ancients were employing defensive measures against their enemy. The more I keep explaining the same things, the less emotional punch they panic. The ancient repetition is wisps are being used for power all over again. They add one thing to the plot to make it look like it's about more than just Sonic beats all the bosses and levels. Tails says he's been studying a door that's locked until Sonic's cyber energy comes near it. Sonic could have come near it on his own. I miss SA1 because when Tails was the Captain Obvious there, Sonic reacted. But now he doesn't even notice somehow. How does Tails have no faith in its ability to beat a Titan as Super Sonic? He knows Super Sonic's invincible and that he has to beat the Titans to get his friends back to normal. Tails has made the most stupid remarks out of any friend of Sonic's in this game. I'm pretty sure he's the only friend of his who said something stupid in this game. And even if Knuckles did once, Tails should not be outnumbering him. Tails was an idiot in Sonic the Comic, and fans of today actually notice. Clearly they don't notice or care how dumb Tails talks as long as he's an engineer. Another redundant flashback. As usual, it's got one line. At least Tikal's flashbacks were long enough to get you invested. Tails warned Sonic to be careful, being as dumb as Amy, since this is equally a waste of time that provokes the same response from him. But this is his best friend who admitted to him he was traumatized by losing him. You'd think he'd humor him this time instead of the opposite. Sometimes there's just nothing to say about these cutscenes that I won't say again about the story as a whole. By the standards of bad Sonic plots, it's impressive that it doesn't have forced threading like a plot hole or bad dialogue all over the place. But nothing to say also means there's nothing good about it that's new to the game either. It turns out the ancients had their spaceships drained of energy because a power source drew the batteries of them in. So they lost the ability to navigate the spaceships. The next flashback has an ancient say that their homeworld was lost, explaining that they are aliens, when before, them being in spaceships could have you assume at first glance that they were only in space to fight their enemy. So put these two flashbacks together and it conveys that the Chaos Emeralds were spaceship batteries for aliens all along. This is ripped straight out of Sonic the Comic, only replace the word Dracon with alien, when the Dracons are much more interesting, having an actual gimmick to them and political structures. The ancients have nothing, and I heard they didn't even look like Chaos Zero originally, and it was only made that way to pander to fans so they'll like them. Why should I care that the ancients wanted a small group of them to guard the Chaos Emeralds? There's another flashback where it's revealed that the ancients had a plan involving sealing their enemy away that was carried out, I assume, because I don't get to see the rest. There's an overly dramatic cutscene where Sonic once again suffers and his friends clichédly talk him out at giving up when it's not in character for Sonic to give up. Unleash would have you believe he was impossible to corrupt, despite Darkspine Sonic disproving that. This drags on longer than I thought, and wastes my time with Sage and Eggman having some boring bickering and the personality-less bad guy of the game generically threatening everybody. But still, it's a cutscene and it's done. What was even the point of having this cyber corruption bullshit? It would have worked if it was a character without plot armor, but it'd still be blatantly unnecessary. I wasn't told that the end is why the cyber corruption is a thing. So I don't understand why it's even a thing, logically speaking. Why would accessing the memories of the ancients backfire on him this way when the ancients wouldn't have programmed that? If he can do this to the cyber energy, why can't he hack his way out of the prison? Sonic thanks his friends, and Sage begs Eggman to get Sonic's help. Why can't she just be persuasive and say of course he's gonna defeat the end? And so he doesn't even need to ask him to. She's lucky that he even decided to ask, instead of just saying that he had to help him. I like the line where Eggman inducts Sonic into the Eggman Empire so he could feel better about getting his help again. Something is fine with an IDW. Still, the plot goes right back into non-stop, pointless exposition after this, with Sage explaining stuff we already figured out. Why does Sonic care about this? The fact that the so-called ancients are aliens and not natives should make it less amazing that their tech's so advanced. I like that Sonic lampshades that things would have been a lot easier if Sage had worked together with him from the start. Was it though? He was doing the only thing he could to save his friends. How could Sage have saved his friends? Sage should have said her name doesn't matter. Not that it holds no meaning. The word Sage has a definition and she'd know it. Why is Sonic telling her that Eggman named her that out of respect? He did, but why is he telling her this? Why would Sonic think Eggman cares about an AI of his, and tell her that when he should be hoping she'd abandon him? Sonic wouldn't care enough to ask her what the Coco are when he already knows at this point. All Sonic would care about this whole game would be saving his friends and then beating the generic final boss monster, who tried to be Chaos again but lacks the interesting character motivation in favor of having nothing. He could have been called Satan and made sense. Him bothering aliens and then going all the way to Earth only reminds me of the Zorda. The Zorda were actually interesting. They had a real motive for going after the Earthlings. Why is Sonic stopping to have Sage tell him Eggman made her when he already assumes that and this is wasting his time? It's good that the plot shows Sonic saying it's hard to believe the emeralds are from space after all this time. Because the revelation is easier to accept than it would be if we never saw a Sonic character react to it with dialogue. It's not really hard to believe that they're from space though. I already saw that in STC. And even if you hadn't, they're magical, completely unearthly gems. There's nothing to talk about with the next two cutscenes otherwise. This is just sad. I have to assume the reason Sonic keeps having boring chit-chat with Sage is that he's hoping the more he talks to her, the more likely she'll be to ditch Eggman. Or at least start doing good deeds without that. Either way, I'm hoping for. The best thing he could do would be to tell her, get rid of the ocean plastic and stuff. Take out the ocean pollution and use the materials for Eggman. That way she'll have a reason to actually do it and she'll be helping people. That's the direction I'd like to have for a character. She can do good and still be with Eggman. It was sweet of him to hope he'd turn her despair into hope. But otherwise, like with most of the game's dialogue, I spend the whole time waiting for it to be over and irritated that's not because it offers nothing. Eggman tells Sonic to not dare lose one of the emeralds he gave him when he doesn't tend to lose emeralds. It's not his fault they scatter after he goes super. It makes sense if, as I assume, he thinks Sonic's gonna hide the emerald instead of give it back to him. I wish I saw how Eggman got the purple emerald. Sage somehow knows the final boss whose name I didn't catch is gonna retreat into space to recover his true form, and so she's necessary to beat it for Sonic. And Eggman sadly lets her. Why wasn't it in its true form from the start? So Sonic goes on to fight the final boss, uncharacteristically saying please and begging the long-dead ancients for their power, even though he's an invincible Super Sonic who beat all the Titans like that and has no reason to overestimate this new boss. And he's not supposed to be that humble. Eggman calls Sage's daughter, which doesn't end up being in the Japanese version. Who in their right mind would name any character The End? This game must have had the laziest editor in the world because that name got past localization. That is the worst name for a character in Sonic. It would still be lazy, but you could have done a better job if you had named him The End in Greek. I like that Amy hugged Sonic without him seeming bothered by it, which only makes sense because he's treated Amy like a friend he's totally fine with in this game. I like that Sonic says that it's fun. The writer shouldn't have even bothered having Tails say he won't recognize him in the next game, because it's obvious to everyone that Sega wouldn't allow that. So Flynn shouldn't have tried to get anyone's hopes up. And the 99% of people who know it'll just be the same in the next game are just going to be annoyed with this line. It doesn't reflect well on the writers. Amy amazingly referencing Styx got people excited. And while it's kinda cool, she already showed up in a Mario and Sonic at the Olympics game, even if it is non-canon, so we should have already known that she was allowed to be referenced in the main canon. I already heard this line before I watched all the cutscenes, and it's been pointed out to me that it could have been a lot better. I'd rather actually see models of Styx and Tangle do stuff in the cutscenes, or at least give you side quests in the hub world. Mere dialogue is the most shallow reference ever. It's not good enough. Even if she said Sally and Antoine, people would still go from even more excited to realizing that's blatant pandering because it's not good enough. Making models with animation takes effort from a larger group of people than dialogue does. Sonic Boom was a recent thing, so of course Styx was referenced. It'd be impressive if someone from Sonic X or Underground was mentioned, because those shows have less of a fan base than SatAM and Boom. So pandering to one of those fan bases will come off as sweet instead of cynical, implying that Sega doesn't care about other continuities if they're old enough, because it only allows references to off-continuity characters that are marketing the new Sonic stuff. They have recent models for Styx, and still didn't put her in the game. So it's no wonder that people point out that you never got to see her instead of just liking the mention. I think I remember hearing that the Japanese script didn't even mention Tangle and Styx. Or at least Tangle. This boring plot rips off Breath of the Wild with its titans and the main character getting memories. And being uncreative could be forgivable if it had fast pacing and mostly involved engaging things happening, instead of being mostly boring dialogue with almost nothing to the plot. It has way too many cutscenes for a little plot there is when it's mostly just about Sonic beating all the bosses and levels to beat the game. It's such a video game plot, and with so many examples of wasting my time that I can't care about it. Unless it's being needlessly depressing with cyber corruption, which Secret Rings sort of did already. It's realistic that characters would reference their past, so I don't see why the references are being complained about. Let alone by the same people who talk like the comics having references alone makes them good. I'll take anything that makes casuals finally dislike a Flynn plot, but I wish it was a legitimate major problem with the story they were hung up on so they'd actually learn something good. I don't want the takeaway from a Flynn story to be that having a lot of references is bad every time. What's bad is using them at the expense of creativity. I'd rather see something new, unique, and interesting. But usually references are good. But what people should learn is that they're extremely faint praise, not something that makes the story. They don't matter because they don't change the fact that the story as a whole was nothing but boring talking. And since that gets old fast, stories like this need a lot less cutscenes to be good, but it was way too slow paced to be good. Now I'll talk about the final Horizon DLC that overwrites the canon of the original ending. Sonic runs ahead and the Eggmobile shows up, so he stops, and Sage tells Sonic his friends sacrificed their normal forms for him because they conveniently knew they had the magical power to do that. Apparently the knowledge was beamed into their heads. So he feels bad about it, and Eggman cathartically mocks Sonic's lame line from Sonic Heroes. Sage offers to restore his friends and tell him how to use the cyber corruption for power to beat the final boss. Logically, if she wants his friends restored despite them being Eggman's enemies, which should prevent her programming-wise from restoring them, she wouldn't keep liking Eggman because he's not going to stop trying to kill the heroes. This is the same girl that didn't tell Sonic information he needed to know because I can't give information to the enemy. She's bound by her programming until this point. And now she can betray Eggman all she wants, and he doesn't even care. Just assume that I think everything not essential to the plot is a boring waste of time here, because it is. Like Sonic lying on the ground just to immediately get back up. He tells his friends he wants their help getting the emeralds. It's so convenient that Amy had her fortune cards with her when there's no reason for her to always keep them with her. Why do they say fortune instead of tarot anyways? Was there a copyright issue? I like that she lampshades that the initial advice she got is stuff she already knew. Because for once, the stating of the obvious was lampshaded. For once, someone didn't want the exposition. Why would anyone care about Eggman taking way too long to describe an ancient observation tower? It's interesting at first, but it doesn't need that much dialogue. Amy certainly wouldn't care about this. She's not the archaeologist Amy from Sonic Boom. The only one of them that it makes sense to not interrupt exposition about ancient history with "I don't care" is Knuckles. And I'd still want to be told that he started to care about history about non-echidnas because Tails gave him history books, and so he read everything about echidnas. Even echidna history is more interesting because it was about echidnas and Knuckles is an echidna. This doesn't relate to any of the characters. There's really nothing to say. Sonic's told he has to climb up the Tower of Memories, and he's told to find MacGuffins to make tower keys. Why wouldn't the key pieces be all right next to each other? Someone would have to intentionally scatter them so that wouldn't be the case. Sage says that Sonic's friends aren't handling their own cyber corruption as well, but when they hand Sonic the emeralds, we don't see them covered in darkness or lying on the ground, and she wasn't shown looking at them right before this. I'd say this is a missed opportunity, but I wouldn't like that either. Eggman was useful by getting Sonic an emerald as well. Instead of boring cutscenes, we should have seen him find it and pick it up. I'm sure that was all there was to it, but it would at least be seeing something happen. All of this is just dialogue. Why would the bad guy say this shell was once his prison? He already knows that, and who is even saying this for? It's really not like Sonic to have a god monster villain that talks like this. Chaos was mute, and while Dark Gaia was like this, he still didn't talk. This is just Demise Ganondorf. At least when Sage flies up and blocks the stuff being sent at her, this is an exciting cutscene to watch. It's still taking too long, but it looks like something's happening. It's flashy looking and the characters are emoting, taking it seriously. Makes the other cutscenes in the game look lifeless by comparison. I'd rather the only cutscenes in a Sonic game be like this. The light around Supersonic hurts my eyes with its extended focus on just it. Sonic goes super and gets sent out of super form, only to quickly go back into and fly up. I guess the End found the Master Emerald and charged himself up with it to do so. How did he lose his super form against his will without running out of rings? He didn't have to collect 50 rings to go back to super form. Apparently this reveals that if he gets tired enough, he can momentarily lose super form only to get it back from sheer stubbornness. Why did he call the End Master King instead? That's what he should have been called. I don't know where the hell the king part came from, or the master, but it's better than the most generic, on-the-nose name ever. Just to look cool, he's drawn to go light blue, wasting a bit of time. I guess Eggman's being shown because he's busy aiming at cannon. Because the light blue Supersonic hits the End in a visual reference to the moon being shot in half that isn't as cool because I don't get to see the End get blown in half. Sonic ends up landing on the ground. Since he fell from the same height as when he did in Unleashed, why didn't he make a little crater and have to struggle to get out of the ground? I assume it's because this ground is harder, and he only survived without injury because he had rings, so when he landed he just lost rings. I like that he's hugged. And it's sweet to see Eggman call Sage his daughter because she appreciates it. What's really interesting is that they hold hands. Someone was actually told to animate that. So that's not something the Japanese script was able to get rid of. It's cute, but I'll never think it's in character for Eggman, because he's been nothing but cartoonish and evil. I can't remember a single time he did something good that wasn't self-serving in the games before. It's not like he offered to hold hands with any other creations of his. He's only doing this because this one looks human. Those who don't question this just because we never saw him be a bad father would make me annoyed if they at the same time thought it'd never be in character for Starline. Of course I look forward to more of this in the next game, but he has to keep doing evil things and driving the plot in engaging ways as well. People are already concerned about the badass DK he has in this game because he spent the whole game just sitting around trapped. And that was Final Horizon. It's got the same feel as the original story. Boring and slow with nearly nothing new, with too much exposition I don't care about. It only existed so we'd see Eggman holding Sage's hand.